Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker, retired, and proud of it. Again, today it's for April 22nd. It's a Friday. For you, it's probably going to be April 28th, a Thursday, or any one of Thursdays or Tuesdays for the next 3 weeks. Consequently, about anything I talk about is going to be terribly obsolete. And because it's going to be terribly obsolete, we're going to talk about subjects that are so obscure and so unimportant that they will remain equally unimportant and obscure in 2 or 3 weeks when you see it. Because the problem with being topical is you're only topical on the day that you're topical. Outside of that, you're talking history. So that's basically where I'm at. Now, again, you notice that today I'm wearing a yellow t-shirt. I am my own engineer. So if there's a glitch and I fall off the chair, this is live to tape, you're going to see me fall off the chair when weeks after I actually fall off the chair. And of course, today we had a similar glitch. When I came out, I was a floating head in front of the world, and consequently, I was wearing a shirt that was chroma keyed out, and yellow seems to come in just fine, so I'm wearing my yellow t-shirt with a pocket. Again, it doesn't get much more sophisticated than a yellow t-shirt with a pocket. So what am I going to talk about today? Well, today there's a number of issues, and there's a number of big issues, and those issues are so fast moving that they're probably not going to be big issues by the time you see them. One of those is the Ryan plan. The Republicans came in with a plan to solve the budget deficit. They cut $6 trillion over 10 or 12 years. And the way they cut $6 trillion was to reform Medicare and Medicaid. What does this word reform mean? There's a guy named Luntz. He's the guy who runs the ad campaigns at a lot of the campaigns for the Republican Party. And he's figured out good words and bad words. So if you're going to do something that hurts people, you don't change it. You don't get rid of it, and you don't replace it with another program. You reform the old program to make it better. So that's what the Republicans have offered to do for Medicare. Medicare was started in 1965 by President Lyndon Johnson. And the reason he started it was he had what he called the Great Society. And among his initiatives was the civil rights voting law, for which Martin Luther King deservedly gets a lot of credit, and a holiday in on his birthday. But in fact, it was pushed through by President Johnson, who replaced Kennedy in 1964, and he was president from 64 through 68. He's probably most famous now for being responsible for the worst part of the Vietnam War, and for the Vietnam War becoming unpopular, and didn't run for re-election the following time. One of the few Democrats, especially since he won in a landslide in 64. But I'm going on and on about this. The reason I am is because he was responsible for, among other things, passing Medicare. And basically his idea was a war on poverty, and that after he got finished with it, nobody in this country would be starving and nobody would go without medical care. And according to his study, the people that were most desperate as far as medical care concerned were seniors over 65. Seniors over 65 just were, their children were either going broke or bankrupt trying to get medical care for their parents, or the parents were going broke. People were being, who were sick, were being thrown out of old people's homes or nursing homes and thrown right out in the street. And in fact, for people over 65, uh, fatality, I'm not sure, mortality is the proper word, was much higher than it should have been, and higher than in some other countries which were considered more progressive. He did not put in socialized medicine. He was accused of it. But what he did do is he set up Medicare, which was a single payer federal system to guarantee medical care, especially hospital care, for everyone over 65, regardless of whether they were already sick, regardless of whether they had chronic problems, no matter what. And this was a tremendous relief of burden, not only on the elderly themselves, who were mostly living on Social Security, but also on their children and their children's children. So that released a lot of money in the next generations, the working generations, to be able to support what became the consumer economy that basically ruled the world economically for the next 40 years. So what are the Republicans all about? Well, basically the way Medicare works is people have a Medicare tax with a cap. I believe the cap's around $86,000, but it could be a little higher. I haven't looked up the exact number. And up to that cap, people pay a certain percent. I think it's between the employer and the people, I believe it's 2.35% of their entire check, of their income, their gross. And it's very, very similar to Social Security, which is about another 12.6%, and totals out between Social Security and Medicare about, I believe, 14.6%. Now, the payroll tax, which is Social Security or FICA, and the Medicare tax, that's pretty much universal. I know even as a federal worker, I paid Medicare tax along with everybody else. However, the Medicare tax is not kept up with Medicare, and the reason it hasn't is the escalation of cost, and especially of medical cost. Now, that escalation has also impacted the private market as well. And the private market is split into the group market, in other words, the market for health insurance that's supported by mostly employers, for which they are exempted from paying any tax, as well as the employee who receives it is exempted from paying any tax. Consequently, for years and years and years, that was ERISA. That was also, oddly enough, in the early 60s, about the same time as Medicare. So the private insurance market is high and increasing, but somewhat reasonable for group policies. In other words, there's some risk sharing going on. However, for the individual or the small business or the individual proprietor, now somebody who's working for himself, the self-employed, who goes on the private market, basically the way that works is the insurance industry decides to treat each person as a risk pool of one. Now, I've had a lot of problems with this. And the biggest problem with it is that first of all, they won't treat anybody with a chronic condition or a prior condition. They won't insure those people at all. And that's supposedly changing with the Obamacare that passed last year. Now, they do have to at least offer insurance. However, what they do is they basically figure out your lifetime medical cost. They divide by the number of months. They add 20% or some amount for a surplus, which is to cover their risk. And then they have to charge profit. And then they have to pay their CEOs $22 million or $137 million and give them a golden parachute for many, many millions more. So basically, the private insurance business is inefficient. The overheads are between 20 and 40% And of course, they're including the surplus as part of the overhead. Well, what is a surplus? Any other business, if you charge for, let's say, olive oil, and you charge more than you paid, that difference would be called profit. It's not true in insurance. The difference between what you charge and what you pay is not profit, it's surplus. And surplus can be declared as profit, or it cannot, and usually isn't. Consequently, insurance companies are notorious bad payers of tax and supporters of the American system. And on top of that, they pay gigantic bonuses and salaries to their executives. They're famous for it, and consequently, Medicare, which is a single-payer federal system, has a 3% overhead, administrative cost, and a 6% overhead, including paying all the people that work for the HHS and all the subcontracts and everything else to process the payments. And I know about this because a parallel system for the spouses for the military people called TRICARE. I worked on TRICARE as a price cost analyst, so I learned how that worked. They're all processed through a company called Blue Cross Blue Shield Palmetto, which handles every single Medicare, every single TRICARE claim, and they have a very, very efficient way of doing it with very, very low cost. However, then we have private insurance. Private insurance is 20 to 40% surplus, their own billing systems, their own charging systems, their own set of salespeople, and so on and so forth. But mostly surpluses, which Medicare does not charge, and even more so, profit and extremely high, compared to the rest of the world, salaries and bonuses and pay packages and options and everything else for their executives. Basically, and I'm going to be blunt about it, in my opinion, a complete and total ripoff. If they should be, if our free enterprise system worked, the private health care should be cheaper than Medicare. And it's not. And it's not mostly because of the greed and the unstoppable and unjustifiable greed of the executives of the insurance industry. And so the Republicans really, really want to help the health insurance industry. And they want to make sure it's saved, even though it's an inefficient, overpriced, expensive system, more expensive than Medicare, more expensive than any of the socialized medicine systems in any of the other industrialized countries, and even some non-industrialized countries. So basically, we have a system which is extremely inefficient. We have another system which, at least for administrative cost, is efficient, although there is a lot of Medicare fraud, and a lot of that Medicare fraud is defrauding by hospitals and other companies that do business with Medicare and with the government. So, and I could go into examples of that, and I won't right now. So what is the Ryan Plan? Well, the Ryan Plan is to take Medicare, take our system of taking care of people over 65 and offering them a voucher and throwing them onto the individual insurance market. So basically what they'll say is the average of cost per person right now of Medicare is $8,000 a person. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you this voucher, and we're going to freeze that until 2021 and freeze it thereafter. So basically, whatever the cost is per person in 2021, you got $8,000. Now, that doesn't sound too bad. And basically, that's what the 2010 value or cost per person is right now. However, that 2010 cost per person is Medicare with a 3% administrative cost and a maximum of 5 to 6% total overhead, including subcontractors and salaries. And so that's a 20 to 40% loss off the top. So the $8,000 that's worth minus 5%, that's worth $7,900 or $7,840 of actual care in the private market, even if an insurance company offered an $8,000 policy, would only buy $5,000 or $4,000 or $5,500 worth of care right now. Now that's taking out all the inflation between 2010 and 2021. So if you figure that even inflation stays relatively low, that's another 25%. So the $8,000 is now only worth $6,000, and then another 40% is taken out for administrative cost surplus and gigantic fees and gigantic bonuses for their executives. Basically, all the elderly are going to get is about $3,000 to $4,000 worth of care for their $8,000 voucher. Well, what are they going to get now? Now they're going to get a guarantee under our present system of all of their expenses for hospitals and everything that Medicare covers. So the difference is now you have a guarantee, which means that even if there's low medical inflation, which is unlikely because there hasn't been in the past, but even if the prices are only 25% more, which means that your Medicare cost per person would be $10,000 at that point, and you're getting screwed out of $2,000. On top of that, you're going to go to a company that has a 20 to 40% administrative overhead cost. And by overhead, we also mean the salaries, the bonuses, the surpluses, the profits, and all the other garbage that the insurance industry wants to add. So basically, the bottom line is the elderly person is going to get screwed. Now, the other thing about the Ryan plan is that they don't believe that insurance companies should have to cover people with prior or preconditions. So that means that half of the elderly people won't be able to get insurance at all. The other half, if you divide their lifetime care, now take into account that there have been studies that says 50 to 60% of your lifetime medical cost is concentrated in the last 2 years of life. Well, everybody who made it to 65 and is capable of getting Medicare is going to have his last 2 years of life covered by Medicare, in which case that covers 50 to 60% right there, plus whatever his costs are running up to that last 2 years. So basically, if somebody has $1 million total medical cost in his entire life, $600,000 to $700,000 of that $1 million is still unspent when they go into Medicare. So a private insurer on that basis is going to say, well, I'll take $700,000 and I will divide by the 12 years of the person's expected life up to the average life. And let's say it's 720,000 divided by 12. That's $60,000. So I'm going to charge this guy $5,000 a year. I mean, $60,000 a year, $5,000 a month for his insurance, out of which he can take his $8,000 voucher that the Ryan plan will give him. So instead of $60,000, he'll only have to pay $52,000, so $4,400 a month out of his Social Security. So the bottom line is this particular idea, this particular program in the Ryan plan is untenable. Basically, it's going to take old people and throw them out on the street. They're going to be sick and dying. Sounds pretty grim. Sounds like a negative way of putting it. It's, I should be calling it reform. I should be calling it a good thing, not a bad thing. Balancing the budget and so on and so forth. However, what it's going to do is the old person is going to be bankrupt. The real hospitals, the real caregivers are either going to have to follow their Hippocratic oath and lose money, or they're going to throw people out in the street, and that's going to be the bottom line. So either you're going to have the old people out in the street, you're going to have the next generation that should be working, that should be helping out their family, that should be spending money and supporting our economy, our consumer-driven economy. They are going to be going bankrupt and losing their houses to try to support their aged parents. As far as estates are concerned, basically the estates are going to be used up. Now, even today, we have situations where medical care is very, very high. Medicare never covered long-term disabilities or long-term chronic problems like Alzheimer's disease. The medicines, yes, the regular hospitalizations, but the idea that somebody needs to be put into a home for the last 2, 3, 4 years of life, Medicare doesn't cover it. It never did. Insurance doesn't cover it because they won't. Because anybody who needs it, unless they went and got long-term care policies when they were 20, are going to be denied because they have previous conditions. Or they're going to charge them the full amount. They might as well just come out with their money and make a deal with the nursing home to say, I'm going to give you your $40,000 or $50,000 a year, because that's what the insurance company will charge. Then they're going to take 20 to 40% off so that they can pay their executives $50 million because they can't afford to lose that talent. Yeah, that talent that now soaks the government out of money and pays themselves giant bonuses, and even bonuses to get fired when they fail. It's the amount they get is going to be even less. So what we have now is we have Medicaid. Medicaid is for the poor. So old people take their estates, they spend them down, and then the rest of their time, if they have dementia or Alzheimer's or some kind of terrible arthritis so bad they can't move, the rest of their time that they're going to be in these nursing homes are paid for by the state and the federal government under Medicaid. Well, the Ryan plan has a solution for that too. And the solution for that is to hand the states a set amount of money in a block grant and say, you can spend it however way you want. You can support people or you can spend it on education. And basically, we don't care. So basically, the elderly are not only not going to be getting Medicare, but they're also not even going to be able to get Medicaid because Medicaid will be spent out. And the result will be, yes, a reduction in the overall deficit over 10 years. However, the ridiculous thing about it is that he was also going to cut taxes, especially for the wealthy, by cutting the top rates from 35 to 25%. And he was going to cut taxes another $3 trillion. So they were only going to make a net of less than, it ended up like 3.8 trillion. There was only going to be a reduction of 2.2 trillion over 10 years. It's ridiculous. My name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride, and I really appreciate your watching. Tune in next time. Thank you very much.